I will call to order March 20th, Monday, March 20th, 2023 FinCom meeting because the hour is 7:00 p.m. I'll do a quick roll call vote for the members that are here, and actually it works really well if somebody jumps in to someone or themselves. They're not here to hear this, but to put the time in the chat so we know when they arrived. Because they're usually, I don't notice because I'm paying attention to other stuff. Kevin. Don't see Kevin. Paula is not coming tonight, and she is not here. That is true. Steve.
Here.
Trace.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Joe.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Cody. Yeah, I don't see him. And Zach.
Here.
And I too am here. Ready to go, Mike?
All right. First, we have assessors. Who put Denise on first?
You. Hi, Denise. A for assessors, I guess.
All right. And there's the assessor's budget. Denise can go over any of the highlights. The salaries, contractual, there's 3 full-time employees in the assessor's office. And then the expenses are up about 15,000. And there's 2 main areas for the expense increase. One is seminars and conferences. There's been an increase in the cost of some of the classes that the assessors have to take, and also an increase in contracted services that Denise can talk about.
Let's see you, Denise. Are you muted?
She's on mute.
Oh.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Contractual services, that's for PK Valuations. That's our software company. And they have not increased their fees in years. So this year they increased them a little bit.
So it looks like you have no expenditures yet for this year, fiscal year?
Not for him. I won't get those until the spring.
Okay, gotcha.
He does it because we're on a cyclical, so we have to wait until they get out there, do all their work, and then in the spring they'll start billing us for it.
Okay. Any questions for Denise? They're not warmed up yet, Denise. I don't know.
Glad I'm first.
No questions? That easy? Okay. You had your chance.
Right.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, everybody.
Next is treasurer. And in the treasurer's office, there's 4 full-time staff people for the office salaries. And then the expenses, there's a $13,000 increase in the expense line item. And is Paula on?
I don't see her, but maybe she. I see that Kevin is here, so I'm just noting his arrival.
Madam Chair?
Sorry, who's that? Was that Joe?
That's me, Joe.
Go ahead, Joe.
Mike, I see a percentage-wise reasonable increase in banking services. Do we know what that is or what that's going to?
The banking services would be, we do services through Unibank.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the services that fees that they charge us on our accounts.
Do we have we been given any reason why there's such an increase?
I do not know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
And we probably should move on and come back to the treasurer's budget when the treasurer is on.
You expect her? Yeah.
Yes.
We can certainly do that.
Okay.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
before you jump off that screen, your first line here, the purchase of services went down significantly. So are the numbers adding up right? I did a quick math in my head and it looks like something's not adding right where that first line item was down. I didn't see that many others going up that much.
I do not know, Paul. I would have to add them up. I assume that they would just add up on the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, you would think so. But... All right, just thought I'd point that out. It just didn't look right.
Okay. So next we have 910. Let me just close. Is that showing on your screens now?
Yep, 910.
Okay. And Paula could speak more on this too, but just go over it with you. The first line item you see there, $3,927,425. That's the assessment that we've received from Bristol County Retirement. And then the next line item is health insurance. And there's three elements there. One is the cost of the medical insurance. The second, $24,000, is for opt-out payments, the people that opt out of the health insurance. And then the last one is copay for health insurance. Next line down is Medicare cost. And the total of $12,645,500.
Money?
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, I'm just curious. So the opt-outs,
Mhm.
contract year, I thought we have the opt-outs, I'm sorry, or the co-pays during a contract year. And then I'm just looking, is the opt-outs capped? Seems odd that there's a flat dollar amount that we expended each year.
They are not capped. Just happens to be the number of people that have taken them.
All right, so we're doubling the co-pays or the opt-outs? I'm looking at this right?
We'll put 24,000 in there. We did it in 21, 22.
Right.
Last year we went down to 12, and that's something that as we review the budget, as we go forward, working on cuts, something we'll look at.
So you're actually figuring out the actual cost. You know how many
Yes,
nobody knew has been opting out.
right.
All right, and then can you just explain the copay again? Or I see we didn't budget anything last year. We have 30,000 this year.
Mhm. So we have a new plan on as part of the program. It's a high deductible plan, and we have to put some money in there. We haven't had people take advantage of it. I don't even know if we have anyone that's taken advantage of it. It's a good plan for someone that wants to start out. You have to contribute to a health savings account. And if you contribute to a health savings account, the town will match the amount you put in up to a certain amount, around $2,500 or something like that.
represents, are you saying $2,500 each employee that gets into this plan, and you're estimating it to be 30,000?
So it's 25, I believe it's 2,500 max that would contribute to someone's health savings account.
That's pretty good.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Mike, did you say health insurance went up 1%?
1%, yes.
Why is it down from last year then?
That was the budget the current year. If you look at 22, it was 7,782,610. And 8,294,838 was what was budgeted for this year.
But so next year we're only budgeting 8.
8,064,165
So that's down.
from what was budgeted this year. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair?
Is that Zach?
Yes, it is. Mike, talk about the last couple of years you've had a healthcare holiday, I believe. I know my wife has a different district as well.
Yep.
Where is that in this? I don't see it reflected here anywhere.
We had this year, we'll have 2 months of holiday. So you'll see it reflected when you see the final expenditure for FY22, because we've already paid the 4,052,000 would be up, up through December, and then in the spring we have 2 months that we don't have to pay.
So you're saying there's going to be about $2 million going back to free cash?
Somewhere around that area. Yep.
And you're assuming you're assuming in this budget that you're not going to have a holiday next year?
Correct. Have to budget just in case it doesn't happen, and 2, I don't have any idea whether we would have one or not.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Joe, go ahead.
Mike, when do we typically find out? When is that after the new fiscal year starts that they would tell us that, or is it sometime before that?
Yeah, this year we didn't know until our meeting in January or February that we were going to do a holiday.
Okay, so it's well into the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
Mike, do you know how much of the Bristol County retirement growth and cost is driven by inflation and how much is driven by change in headcount?
Most of it would probably be driven by headcount. It's an actuarial basis. They've done a projection. They're looking to have the county system fully funded by 2035, I believe it is. So they have a formulary that they use to figure out what we're paying towards that, and then whatever we have as far as retirees would add to it.
Any other questions about 910 employee benefits?
Madam Chair, just one.
Yes, Cody, go ahead.
Mike,
Welcome.
is the basis of the medical insurance, that's based on current head count? That's not accounting for any potential increases in headcount, like if the DPW gets formed and we gotta put hire a new director for that?
No, Paula would put in, for possible increases. I think usually she leaves, the treasurer leaves around 10, figuring that 10 people could either leave the single plan and go to a family plan, or we could have people come on. So about 10 new members is always estimated.
Okay, so there's a margin built into it.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Mike, do you know how many employees actually roll up through the medical insurance plan from a per capita rate? Like, how much does the 8 million cover if you're trying to get a per capita number?
I don't know how many are on it. I can let you know that.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Zach.
Mike, this includes everybody for the town, including school teachers, DPW, everybody, soup to
Yes.
nuts?
It does. Yep.
Okay, I mean, can we, particularly for town meeting and, people's knowledge, is there any way to get a pie chart and say, okay, we have fixed and shared expenses over departments? Is there any way to say that's, okay, this is what it costs for your fire department, which includes the lights, the medical insurance, this is what it costs for your police department. This is what we spend on education. And you have all these things that cross over. Is there any way of, putting together just a simple pie chart? So when a resident says, okay, this is what we spend on, this percentage of the budget goes to fire, police, DPW, education, so on and so forth. Because it is a little convoluted with all these fixed and shared expenses.
I can look into doing that. Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Next is unemployment. And we budgeted 75,000 this current year. And that's what we have budgeted proposed for next year also.
Any questions about 9/11 unemployment?
Madam Chair, I just have one question on the previous slide. On the medical insurance, how is is the water department included in that? And is that deducted from retained earnings, or how does that all work?
Yep, as part of the retained earnings are the expenses, the fixed and shared, not the fixed and shared expenses, the indirect expenses. It's a direct charge on the water and sewer.
They're coming up. Stay tuned. No questions about unemployment.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
So if I'm understanding this correct, Mike, if there were to be layoffs, then is this projected to cover any potential layoffs, or is this just a catch-all just in case?
Right now, it's just in case, and we'd have to see what happens with layoffs and maybe come back and adjust the number in the fall.
So if there are layoffs, how is the unemployment determined? It's based on a percentage of their annual earnings?
Yes, it's based on whatever someone's salary is.
this includes everything? Is
It
it
does.
schools? Is this DPW? This is soup to nuts?
Yep, it does. It includes all departments, including schools, police, fire, DPW.
That fuel expense, is that school buses too, or just police, fire, DPW, and highway? I mean, water and sewer.
Yeah, it would include schools. I'm not sure if the small buses would probably get fueled here. I'm not sure. I don't think the large buses get fueled at our facility. They're on a contract. But any of the other vehicles that the schools have would use this, yes.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Kevin.
I mean, I just wanted to reiterate Joe's point. I mean, that package policy just kind of makes me seasick. We're already well overspent. So I don't know if something changed from an underwriting perspective or if it was, if some people are scratching at the scope of the assets. It's a huge increase year over year.
Yeah, and as I said, I don't have anything from the insurance company at all yet for next year. That's strictly a
Well, I mean, when we budgeted the 283 last year, we're already at 317. Like, did they give any rationale in fiscal years to why there's such a delta?
because last year, one of the things was, I know we added cyber insurance, which we didn't have before.
Yeah, I know we talked about that last year at
Yeah.
length.
Yeah. And then we had the increase. I'm not sure when the water treatment plant was fully valued. And then the work that's been done on the ball fields. Look at the ball fields now, the solar panels, so all that'll add on.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Paul.
Mike, is any of that for the new town hall and senior center? Will they be ready for this next fiscal year's insurance or not?
They won't.
They won't, okay.
Possibly the senior center for a month or two, but the town hall won't be. I don't even know if the senior center will be.
Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
Mike, is there any possible way that we could take a look at the policy or the schedule of values or the various exposure base that we're declaring?
Yeah, I can get you the schedule of values.
And could you, would it be appropriate or would it be okay to share a copy of the policy?
Sure.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Zach.
like I see this coverage in here for like the select board liability and police liability. What does, if somebody brings a suit against the schools, what section is that? Is that under public official or where is that covered? If,
School board insurance liability.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not, I missed that. What about on the, we talked about the construction projects, the senior center and the new town hall. Is construction policy while the construction's going on, is that part of the debt exclusion? Or how
It
is
is.
that gonna be covered?
Yeah, it's part of the expense, the debt exclusion.
And is the contractor supplying that, or is that something the town is doing?
The town does it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for 940 miscellaneous?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
Just one other question for you, Mike. Do you, how long have we been with our current agent?
Well, at least 11 years.
When was the last time that was looked at?
I don't know. Not in 11 years. It hasn't been.
Okay. Maybe time to take a look at that.
All right, any final questions? Or miscellaneous?
Okay. Next is water and sewer.
And Frank is here, I think. As long as he's still here, he was here.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Hi, Frank. Welcome.
Let me get which Frank, which do you want to do first, water or sewer?
Yeah, why don't we do the big one? Why don't we do water first, please?
All right, let me find that.
So big.
Just so you all know, what Mike kind of put up on the screen is only a partial budget. It does not include the interfund transfers for each enterprise account. So those are some pretty significant numbers that are missing from this. We are the last people to know what that number is going to be after the town does their calculations based on everything that we pay back to the town. If you look back at the FY23 budget, you'll see it's just around, it was 558, 352. We anticipate that number increasing as it has each year, some years substantially more than others on the water portion of it. So, you know, if you look at that bottom number where it is now and add that, that'll give you, should give you a feel of what we're looking at for a total number, even though it's not 100% accurate. So John and I have gone through this. We've actually dropped a few of the line items by very small amounts just to make that bottom number a little bit more appealing. And unfortunately, with the recent information that we just heard, if anybody's been following the news, the EPA has changed the set points for testing on the forever chemicals, which are known as PFOS and PFOA. They moved that from the federal limit of 70 parts per trillion down to 4 parts per trillion. Basically, what that's going to do is make every single water supplier in the state of Massachusetts and just about everywhere else exceed that amount. So testing is going to change vastly based on these new criteria. It's basically going to be like starting over. So we're in a situation now, thankfully, knock on wood, Norton has not exceeded the Massachusetts level of 20 parts per trillion that was set back in 2020. When these changes come into place for PFOA and PFOS, and the numbers are actually set in stone at 4 parts per trillion, we will more than likely at least lose one well entirely until we do some type of treatment facility there. And there is a potential that the other 4 or 5 wells could also be impacted and need some type of filtration addition in order to remain below those numbers. So we're talking some substantial hits, unfortunately, not just for Norton, but for everybody. But as far as our numbers go, a few of the line items that you see here, if you quickly look down, a few of the biggest items that have changed are going to be the advertising and reports cost, the data processing costs, and of course the laboratory fees. I know you guys are all about numbers. I can run through some quick numbers just so you can have them in the back of your head. Again, these are all preliminary numbers. Where we stand right now, a PFOS sample costs us $350 per sample. We have obviously 5 wells that we take samples from, and then we have a combined source at the water treatment facility. Since 2020, we've been able to sample out of most of our locations and actually get them down to what's called quarterly monitoring based on the numbers coming in below the 20 parts per trillion and lower by a significant amount. There's one well that has hovered in the teens, so that one is still on a monthly basis. But based on the new guidelines for these type of samples, everybody's going to start from square one. Every sample is going to have to be taken at a source, and it's going to have to be taken monthly until you have enough criteria that the EPA feels confident that your source is not going to change and vary. So the PFAS levels and PFOA levels do change based on the aquifer levels. Drought, significant flood, all of that impacts it. So until they're happy with the data that's provided to them, then they'll make a determination if and when that location can go back to quarterly or what's known as reduced monitoring. There's also talks that we've heard from the laboratories that because these new samples are at the threshold that is basically the lowest possible detect found for PFAS and PFOA at 4 parts per trillion, the cost of the samples could be substantially more than the $350 we pay per sample now. So again, all of that, we're still waiting on some final numbers and some final dictation from the EPA. But just as some basic ballparks, if the sample stayed at 350 and we have to take 5 samples a month, we're at 1,750 a month. If we have to take the extra sample, including the blended source, which is the water treatment facility, that jumps us up to $2,100 per month, $25,200 a year just in samples alone, not including any repeats or any duplicate samples if they didn't like the base samples that were provided to them. The biggest hit that we're going to see is going to be if and when we exceed their limits, their MCL that's going to be set in place. Right now, public notices are costing us between $3,800 and $4,200 per post, and that's all dependent on the size of the post, how many pages it is, how involved it is. So obviously, you take that, and the opportunity is there that you're going to see an exceedance basically every 30 days. If you have a well that has to remain online in order to meet the demands of the town, regardless of how much you use it, you're going to be required to do a public notice explaining that that well is being used, even if it's on a limited basis. So you're looking at best case scenario, if you have to do 1 posting per month, 3,800 times 12 is $45,600. If it's on the higher side at 42, we're up to $50,400 per year. That's on top of the sampling costs, and that does not include the newspaper ad that is also required as part of the public post, which that obviously is not as substantial, comes up to about $10,000 per year. But these are all huge impacts that we're going to see on top of the normal budgets and separate from what needs to be done to remove these forever chemicals from the water. Those we're talking in the millions and millions of dollars with alterations to facilities, building new facilities, or possibly, looking for additional sources or building tanks to hold the water so that it can be filled. There's a multitude of unknowns here, but those are the biggest things that you're going to see have changed in this. If you saw the original one that was presented a while back, those are the biggest lines that have changed. I know that's a lot to take in, but I figured I'd get it out in the open first, and now we can go for questions.
Madam Chair.
Hold on 1 second, Kevin. Can you just scroll down, Mike, so we can see the bottom of the... Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Frank, have they given us guidance on, you talk about the MCL limit and things, like have we looked at what their expectations are statistically, our historical data, and in your expertise, is there a high risk that we're going to be going on monthly in most wells, or do we not have a lot of volatility in our readings?
We don't have a choice. The initial testing requirements are to do every site monthly. If we have good results coming out of each individual sampling site, once we meet their requirements for whatever length of time they want to govern it for, we could see that we are reduced to a quarterly monitoring at 1 or more of the facility sites. Oddly enough, and I know this is going to be the most unpopular thing that anybody wants to hear, well 1, which is untreated and still has the higher levels of manganese, oddly enough has the lowest number of PFAS in town. If there's a correlation there, I don't know about it, but that's just some odd facts for you. The water treatment facility with the 2 new wells, if you guys are unaware, well 5A, the newest well, actually went online today. We had the approval after our inspection on Friday from Mass DEP, so that well went online this morning. So we have well 6, well 5, and well 4 that combined and feed the water treatment facility. Those numbers there, even going through the green sand filters that do have some GAC in them, hover right at the limit of the detect. So there is some chance that you could see some modifications needing to be done to that brand new facility already to consistently stay below the 4 parts per trillion MCL. Well 3 is basically going to have to be taken offline until we can determine a feasibility option there, either building a removal system on site or possibly even plumbing a water main specifically designed for that water to come all the way across town from Newland Street to Plain Street and actually blend with the water treatment facility, which is allowed. So there's quite a few moving parts there, but unfortunately with these numbers being set where they are, and the EPA's goal is actually 0. So once testing is able to go lower than 4 parts per trillion, I would expect that they're just going to continue to move it down and say they want everything removed, which again is going to require treatment at every facility.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Zach.
Hi, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Zach. How are you?
All right. Well, this was just announced. I saw in the news maybe last week or within the last couple of weeks. So I assume they're just not going to slam this down everybody's throat immediately. Is that fair to say? Because I don't think, not only in Massachusetts, I think the country as a whole has a problem. And they got to give people time to, years to come up with remedies. So when are you thinking that they're going to start enforcing this?
They have a 60-day review period that went in place. The limit has already been set by the EPA. If you do a search right now and you do a search for PFAS limit, PFAS PFOA is set at 4 parts per trillion on the federal level. Years ago, when we did other sampling, the federal limit was actually 70 parts per trillion. Massachusetts chose to put a more stringent requirement in place, and that's how we were at the 20 parts per trillion from 2020 till now. They want this stuff out of the water yesterday. They realize how bad it is for everybody. Granted, there are many other things out there that are equally as bad or worse, but this is something that the EPA can control. So they're moving really quick with this. There's a 60-day review that they're looking for people to voice their opinions, voice their concerns, but I don't think anybody's going to stand up against the EPA and say anything that they haven't already heard that's going to sway their opinion one way or another. They expect this to be implemented. Any of the surrounding communities that have already tested above that 20 parts per trillion were required to build treatment facilities and start immediately. We have been very lucky here in Norton that since 2020 we haven't had an issue, probably because we're at the bottom end of the aquifer and everything else has been removed before us, which is perfectly fine on our side. But we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time. We did not expect this major change. We did hear that there was rumors that they were looking at possibly cutting it down, but I don't think anybody anticipated going from 70 down to 4.
So, seeing this was just announced 2 weeks ago, what is your plan? Is it you're going to get quotes? You're going to hire an engineer. Where do you go from here to try to at least come up with a number that it's going to cost X and it's going to require capital and everything else? Where's your starting point right now?
Right now, we've already started talking with the engineers, looking at what we can do with the facility that we have online, the water treatment facility, seeing if there's any modifications that can be done there. Until this is set in stone and it is made very clear. So we're talking about PFAS 6. So the 2 worst ones out of the PFAS 6 are PFAS and PFOA. Those are the ones that have the 4 parts per trillion threshold. The other remaining 4 have an action level per se. Not saying that they're any less dangerous, but they haven't come up with a standard for what they want to put in place for an MCL. So that's still waiting to come down the line. What we're talking with the engineers now about is some basic filtration that you can do, which is using GAC filtering, basically just granular activated carbon. Our concern is that any monies that we spend, we want to make sure that it's not only going to cover these type of contaminants, potentially any other ones that might be coming down in the future. So I think it'd be in everybody's best interest to look at possibly building something that's far more exceeding than the minimum and possibly taking care of some other contaminants. Unfortunately, PFAS, PFOA, and these Gen X chemicals have been around for quite some time. We've been sampling these as well as all the other water suppliers for many, many years now, giving the EPA, DEP all the data that they needed for what contaminants are in the water. There are thousands of contaminants that we sample for every so many years. It's in the UCMR recordings that we do, and right now they're up to UCMR 5 or 6 unregulated contaminants. So once enough information is gathered, then they determine a health risk and they set an MCL for it. So this is not going to be the last time we see something like this that they find that is very dangerous in water that didn't actually originate from water. You know, water is a universal solvent. All these are man-made chemicals, you know, used over the industry for many, many years. Unfortunately, as a forever chemical, they get stuck in water, and now it's our responsibility to remove them. On a side note, not to get off on a tangent, but also these same PFAS and PFOAs that we're going to be dealing with in the clean water are also going to be dealt with in the wastewater. There is new regulations coming down about sampling wastewater before it goes to a combined facility, and all of those testings and costs and stuff will be incurred more than likely by the sewer department. That is something that's unfortunately coming down at a later date.
So if you had a blank check today and we said, spend what you need, how long would it take to bring it to the to compliance?
With the supply chain issues that we're seeing now, and if it was my choice of what we would build, we would probably build a reverse osmosis facility and then finish it off with GAC. We're talking substantial zeros here, and I don't know if I have the land to even build such a plant. More than likely, we'd be looking at putting in some type of ground storage holding tank and actually pumping water into that vessel, pumping it out through a filter before it goes into the system. It's quite a process. It's quite involved. And the biggest thing is you can't have water move too quickly over any of these type of filtration units. So it's great that we have the new wells online and that we can pump, 1,300 gallons a minute. You can't filter water that fast. So, as quickly as you can remove it, you have to slow it down before you filter it.
So I'm trying to say, if you had a blank check, it's a multi-year process to get where you need to be.
Yes, I would say you definitely could be in a double-digit turnaround time from start to finish before you actually see removal.
Mm.
And then let's get to the final question: retained earnings, and I'm guessing you're going to need another water rate increase.
There is a possibility that we're going to see some backing from the congressman. There is monies available through grants for other towns. Unfortunately, because Norton has not exceeded, we cannot attach ourselves to any of those monies. Once the guidance comes down and once we have our first round, which actually shows that we are in non-compliance, then we become eligible for, attaching those additional funds. And I know Mike and I and John have been talking about joining in on some class action lawsuits against some of these commercial companies that have created this problem. But again, we're not at the top of the list because we haven't actually had a problem yet.
Thank you, Frank.
Mhm.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Sandy, go ahead.
Frank, is it fair to say that not only is there an increase in the cost of the GAC filters and adding them to the plant, but we're also going to have to replace those filters? The ongoing costs for maintenance in that system is going to be pretty high as well.
100%. If we modify what we have on site now, possibly removing 2 of the green sand filters and making them just GAC filters, and it still has to be looked at. We're still throwing some numbers around to see if we can even do it. Again, it means slowing the water down coming into the plant, and we just need to make sure that we have enough storage on hand that can handle that type of basically non-pumping situation. While you filter the water out and you move that filtered water through the system and put it into the storage tanks, we want to make sure that it's not going to create a pressure issue. It's not going to have, any deterrent to anything else that's going on, building in town, anything like that. So there's still a lot of numbers that are being worked on. And there's a good possibility that all in all, that because that system wasn't designed to handle that, it may not be able to be modified simply and make it work. I know our neighbors in one of the surrounding towns actually had to build an external filtration facility in their parking lot before it went inside and was and the rest of the filtration was done. We don't have that option there because of the footprint limitations we had based on the area that was chosen. Right now, we barely have enough room to bring an 18-wheeler in and have chemical deliveries dropped off. So we can't absorb any more of the footprint that's there. So again, it might require doing some pipe work, possibly putting a tank down where our well 4 currently is, pumps, motors. So there's a lot of moving parts to that. I wish it was simpler than it was. And I wish there was more lead time, from the EPA. They could have gone about this in a different way. Yes, we all realize and we all agree that it's some very bad stuff. But if they would have given us 5 years, 10 years, and set some goals that we had to achieve and then stop, basically slapping us saying, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Now you have to do public notices. But, putting $50,000 or $60,000 aside when you could put that towards the solution, it seems counterproductive to me.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, Frank. When you did your initial description there, outside of the laboratory fees, so I understand, the additional thing there, you mentioned public notices and ads in newspapers and all those sorts of things. Can you kind of break down what categories those things each fall into?
Oh, sure. So the advertising and CCR reports, which is 5302, you'll see that that was at 15,000. We're jumping that up to 30,000.
Right, but what's included in that? Is that just the advertising in the newspaper, or like what falls under that category?
No, the advertising there is going to be what is printed and has to go out to the customers. The CCR report is our consumer confidence report.
Okay.
That goes out annually. There's going to be basically educational outreach that has to go on once you exceed PFOS and PFOA. It may involve items to the website. It may involve flyers and brochures going out, direct mailings, and then the data processing cost, which is the line item right below that, 5303. We're going from 21,000 up to 50,000. That there is the cost that it takes when we come up with a mailing or the public notice and we send it off to the company that we currently use now. They print, they stuff, they address, and they put the postage on each of those mailings that goes out to each homeowner or each resident. So that's where the significant cost is, and that's a guesstimate. So we could be off on that depending on how much information has to be given to the resident. The other obviously is the laboratory fees, which is 5381. We only did a small jump on this because again we're still not 100% sure of what is going to be required. So we went from 65 to 90,000. So there is some unknowns, and we have questions that are out to the EPA, to our representative. Typically, if we have an exceedance at one location, it requires one public notice. What we would like to see, and we anticipate seeing, because of the costs that are going to be incurred by everybody, if somebody has 4 or 5 wells like Norton does, if you have multiple locations that exceed, we would like to see, it's one public notice that goes out listing all of the exceedances, possibly the dates of the samples, what the levels were, but not individual notices being sent out. So again, until we have everything in writing in front of us, these are our best guesses where we want to go. And, it could unfortunately change. Hopefully it goes down.
What's your confidence that we'll have that information before the final numbers are needed at the town meeting?
Honestly, I don't feel too confident about it. The EPA moves very slow.
Okay.
We have some good connections with them, but to get a solid answer out of them, they like to give a lot of different examples of what would happen, but to get a solid answer usually takes a little bit of time, which on our side, it's good and bad. Bad that we haven't exceeded and that we're not eligible to start putting in for grant monies, federal funding and all that. Good that we don't have to start actually spending this money.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that was going to be your answer, but I wanted to check.
I wish it wasn't.
Thank you.
Chair.
Who is that?
Sorry, Kevin.
Kevin, go ahead.
Hi, Frank.
Okay.
And everything, I mean, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but isn't it right now just the proposal phase? I mean, isn't like the EPA saying we're gonna have some public meetings, it's open for debate, it's got to go through the state legislature? Like, is it the testing requirements even going to hit in calendar year before it makes its way through all the legislative processes?
From everything we've seen, it's already changed and it's just waiting for the final signature. I don't think they put it on their website as 4 parts per trillion, which is the standard, if they haven't already made the change. We hope to see that it is modified in some way, shape, or form. We've reached out to a few of the different representatives. Again, no representative or no other form of government is going to fight against the reasons for removing this. We're not asking them to do that. We would just like them to join the fight with us with how it's being implemented. Give the department some time to make the necessary adjustments before penalizing us. That's kind of all we're asking for support on that end. But even that's a stretch. Asking somebody to say, it's not that important, let's wait another 6 months. I think everybody is aware of how bad the stuff is. Unfortunately, I think still most people have Teflon pans in their home. I know I do. It's hard to break tradition from what you used to, just because somebody changes a rule overnight. So this is going to be a lot of public education, informational sessions, and we'll go from there. But I wish I had a different answer for you. But as far as everything we've seen from New England Water Works, American Water Works, the EPA, and the DEP, they're telling us to prepare for it.
And Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Paul.
on a slightly different level, Frank, how you doing?
Good, Paul. How are you?
I don't want to jinx you like saying it's a quiet night at the firehouse and we're up all night, but the in-house water main projects, is that
Yep.
for water main repairs?
That is not. That is for projects that we can handle on our own. We, a couple years ago, did the 4-log water main install over at well 3, which certified that well so that it meets 4-log virus removal. We anticipate also doing that down at well 1. Again, hopefully we can still use that location, possibly do some type of filtration there. But either way, we want to make sure that the log is high enough so that virus removal is determined there.
Okay, I just noticed the last couple of years you haven't really spent anything out of that, including this year. And do you get to hold on to that, or does they get turned back as free cash every year?
We try and roll that number over every year. We've done a few smaller side road extensions where in the years past, the fire hydrant didn't extend to the end of the cul-de-sac. It was just as the crow flies and they stopped it halfway down the road. So we've used some of that money there. And some of the other stuff that we've not used on is actually money that we have, or I should say a value that we have sitting here in our parking lot, which is some old ductile iron water main and some reuse hydrants. So that's some of the reasons why in the past couple of years you haven't seen that line item go down. We did use that possibly 2021 or 2020 for some drilling over at one of the wells. But for the most part, we keep it there, hopefully be able to do some of these small roads.
You kind of just touched on it. How much old pipe are we still talking about in town that still is a major capital expense, or are we getting pretty caught up on the replacement?
We're in a better position than we were many years ago. We still have quite a few miles to replace. We have selectively removed some of the problematic pipes in town. We do have ARPA funding, county money, that is actually going to replace some of the oldest pipe remaining in town, which is South Worcester Street, from Barrows to Parker Court. That is some of the oldest cast iron and AC pipe that still remains in town. That is on the works to be done. We have some design that we're going over now, And the next area that's also going to be replaced is a section of East Hodges that has been the problem area for the past 4 years. So unfortunately, what that's going to do is it's going to move that problem area to another section of town, whatever the next weak link is. But systematically and very slowly, we're picking away at removing some of these older mains and problem areas.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
Hi, Frank. I'll start with an easy one, I guess. The fuel, gas, and diesel charge, is there a reason that's a separate line item on your budget as opposed to the shared miscellaneous we just went through?
We've always broken that down in the water and in the sewer budget. We pay that to the highway department. We get a bill from them, and that changes often based on whatever contractor they get. I believe Burke was the last one that we've used. So we've always budgeted that line item separately.
So, Mike, is that counted as income on the town budget, or is it just an offset on the fuel budget that we just went through?
It would be an offset on the fuel budget.
Okay. And then, Frank, a couple of questions I had on just kind of the logistics issues that you went through. As far as the space goes, is there any opportunity to do any land acquisition to expand the footprint if we need to in those areas where we might need the space to build out?
The land surrounding each of the facilities is protected to a point. Based the zone 1 and zone 2s are protected. Outside of that, there is potential that we could possibly look at utilizing by either land swap, land that's owned by the town or by conservation, and swapping that out with other land that the water department owns. If we had to do some type of a tank facility and plumb to that, if a filtration and tank could not fit on each of the footprints that we currently own, it's definitely something we had looked at over at Well 3 many years ago, opposite Well 3, which is on Newland Street. There was land that was set aside and was almost allocated to be another well location. The town of Easton came in, put in some satellite wells, and now the two locations are too close together. So there's a possibility that that land could be used for a tank and filtration facility to help out with well number 3, which again is the one that reports highest so far with the PFAS numbers, but hasn't exceeded. So those are all items that are in the works. There is some other land around that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Well 3, the Red Mill entrance off of Newland Street, directly across the street from that entrance is water department owned land, and it abuts the Burning Hills parking lot area where the trucks and items are there. So it's very close to our Well 3 location, and I think it would be a much better option to do some type of facility there instead of plumbing Well 3 all the way across town.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of moving parts, and unfortunately a lot of zeros behind each one of them.
Right. And then the last question I had was, is there an opportunity to coordinate with other towns like that could basically handle everybody's needs?
Oh, good question. I like that one. Unfortunately, the answer is actually no. Each town has a different chemical makeup to the water. So not only do you have to remove these forever chemicals, but you also have to treat the initial water. So Norton has high levels of iron and manganese, slightly higher than what you see in Mansfield, and also even further up the line in Foxborough. The water quality is slightly different based on where we draw from the aquifer. So one combined location would actually create a sampling nightmare for DEP and for the communities that are fed by it, because you'd have multiple combined sources from different points of the aquifer. I know right now we had an issue that we looked at a while back with well 1 and possibly plumbing that over to the water treatment facility. Although it's in the Taunton River Basin, well 1 is separate from the Canoe River aquifer. So it'd be what's called an interbasin transfer. The paperwork alone to do that and the costs are so significant, it just wipes it off as an option.
Okay. So, and we're talking on, so the supply side is different than the sewage side and the wastewater treatment. So
correct.
On the front side, pre-treating the water that's coming out versus the water that's being returned.
Yep, everything different. Raw water is totally different from what the finished water would be. The other issues that we run into is that we actually run at a higher pressure than most of our surrounding towns. So the opportunity for them to actually feed water to us would have to be overcome either with some type of pumping system or additional trunk lines with pressure reducing valves in order to allow their water to enter our tank system and vice versa. So it's just something that just really doesn't work unless you had a catastrophe. And then what would happen, as we have supplied Mansfield in the past during an emergency, basically they would isolate a section of their town and they would run off our water and our system pressure because the two systems just don't blend well together. We don't have an option with Attleboro, even though we have emergency connections with them. Same thing, different pressures, and they are actually surface water. Well, we're groundwater, so there's a whole different requirement for sampling with that. And again, you get into a clerical nightmare if you stop blending those two sources together.
Okay, thank you.
I know we didn't touch too much on the other numbers here. I just wanted to point out some of the larger ones. But again, please remember looking at this that we do not have the interfund numbers for water or for sewer. Those are the last numbers that get added, and that covers all of our expenses that the town incurs and we pay back, as far as the insurances, including personnel, vehicle, building, all of that.
Is the $2 at the bottom of the very bottom of the column G a typo?
It is a typo.
Okay. And do you have control of the screen so that we can see the very last line? Or
Mike has control.
Mike. There it is. Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
Sorry, Frank, I lied. My last question. We didn't touch on salary and wages and the overtime costs. It looks like we're running under budget currently for the current fiscal year, slightly. I guess the two questions I have is the first is it looks like the salaries, I guess, are down from the budget last year, and overtime is up, or I guess relatively flat. Is there any potential to cut overtime by adding one position, or how is that looking?
Well, first off, please remember that this is not a completed budget. We're in a contract year, so there are going to be some changes that you're going to see, contractual changes based on percentage raises that'll be coming, possibly stipend adjustments and all that. So the other part of the budget still is not 100% complete yet. We don't have the option, as much as I really wish we did, of adding another staff member to knock down on the overtime. So the overtime typically goes to the most experienced personnel. They are the ones that unfortunately bear the brunt of that. And adding a new staff member, they don't equal the same value to the department. It takes years and years of not just getting the licenses by going to school for it, but years and years of experience to be able to put them in a situation where they can do something on their own. So some of the stuff that you see here, as far as where the overtime expense may be. It could have been because we had a junior operator running a facility and had a question and had to call in a senior operator to make the final determination. So unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of that with, the older people retiring and moving on, and some of the newer people, even though they have 3, 4, 5 years experience, they've just not seen everything that can possibly come before them. So you're going to still be required to move it up the chain and call somebody else. And if they have to respond contractually, we have to pay them that overtime.
Okay, and just looking at the past expenditures, I know we're still in a green year as far as the current fiscal year, but looking back to 22, we were at 142. If we double what we're at through the end of 2022, we're going to be at 140, call it. Is there a reason that the request is double the trend?
I think you're just not seeing everything that's completed as of yet. There is additional work that has to go on as these new wells come in. Unfortunately, it can only be handled by our senior operators, our primary and our secondary operators. So they are at the highest rate of pay. And, unfortunately, a lot of the work that gets performed is done after their normal working hours. So the contractor, as I just mentioned, we just had 5A come online. The contractor's there. He's there from 7 to 5. He gets as much work as he can get done during the daylight hours. If that requires our operators to stay, obviously we can't, deny them the working time that they need to get the project done, or it would put lengthy delays on the turnaround time for those facilities. So you're going to see some overtime costs that are in there. Unfortunately, if we do see changes come down the line to the sampling requirements, again, it falls on the senior operators to make sure it's done, because the last thing we want to do is have an erroneous sample taken in error. Obviously they're very costly, and you may see the senior operators taking some of the secondary operators with them, because we do try and cross-train everybody as possible. But we try and do everything we can to knock down those the overtime amounts. But unfortunately, just the way that system works, we have operators that are there every day. They're not there 24 hours a day, but they have, the 2 shifts that are operated during the day. We have somebody on call 24/7, and we have somebody there on the weekends as well. So
let me ask it a different way, because I think I'm just looking at the historical trend. So 21, we were at 173, 22, we're at 142. Right now, if we just double that number through the end of 22, we're call it 140. Is there a reason that the request is at 288 when the highest number we've had in the past 3 years is 173?
I will have to relook at it. Honestly, I'm looking at the numbers that I've been looking at for 4 days now, doing the other reports. It's possible it could have been a mathematical error. Until we get the final over to you, and I can really hone in on that. But I know there's going to be substantial changes with the amount of sampling and stuff that has to be done in the future. So it may have been something that we did anticipate and budget a really high number for, but I'll be truthful, the number does look high by looking at it compared to the other.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Frank about water? It appears not. Want to speak too soon? All right. So, sewer? Anyone? Go ahead, Frank.
Wastewater, for the most part, is going to be pretty simple. You're going to see contractual changes that are going to be coming. Again, we don't have the interfund number to add to this line item here, and we do not know yet if there are going to be any expenses incurred, because Norton is a co-permittee of the MFN. So as I mentioned, unfortunately, PFOS and PFOA transfer over from clean water into the wastewater, and there are new requirements for removing that from the end user, which is the MFN that we're we join the three communities with. There is talk right now, and again, nothing in stone, that there's going to be sampling requirements done at each of the individual entities so that the MFN will know where their concentrations of these chemicals are coming from. The unknowns still exist for who is going to pay for and maintain the sampling devices that need to be installed. We don't know where they would need to be installed, and we don't know the frequency of samples that would need to be taken there or the cost. So a lot of unknowns that is still being worked out with Mass DEP with this. They really wanted to have an April 16th deadline for this. I don't see that happening. This is something that's been pushed down the line for a little ways, but some of that actually includes mapping for the sewer system, putting it so it's accessible online for multiple different users to view if necessary. So there's definitely some engineering work that's going to need to be done to create that type of system for monitoring and reporting. So all of those numbers are not in here because we didn't even have a basic guess that we could provide for you.
Can you scroll down, Mike? Ooh,
Madam Chair?
is that Paul?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Frank, I would think that'd almost be cost prohibitive because you tie into that main interceptor in so many different locations. You'd have to put a test point at each spot or something.
There is a possibility that it may need to go in each manhole that connects to the MFN interceptor to verify what is coming in from Norton separate from Foxborough and Mansfield.
That's crazy.
Yes, it is. Most of those locations have a flow meter, so it would be a modification to what's required there if there is room. If you're talking about installing a completely separate manhole to do that and running additional power or anything like that, obviously now we're talking significant costs. But
Yes.
yeah, I really hope it doesn't happen.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Zach.
Frank, just a quick overview. Where is there sewer in town? I know down the Grove along Main Street. Is that about it, or is there other sections of that you have sewage?
So we have sewer that surrounds the Norton Reservoir. We have which covers the Grove area there. We have a portion of sewer up on Mansfield Ave that starts at the 157 Mansfield Ave Mobile Home Park, runs past Roach Brothers down to the Great Woods pumping station, takes a left, joins in with the Grove sewer. We have sewer down around Lake Winnicott, portions of Bay Road, Knollwood, Charlotte Ave, not Knollwood. Yeah, it escapes me. King Philip Road, Charlotte Ave. We also have sewer, direct sewer that goes to Taunton, which is down on the lower end of South Washington Street. It also takes Commerce Way. And then we have sewer that is the new one on West Main Street. And we have sewer that runs from Norton Glen down to Newland Street, down to the K Streets, actually goes into Mansfield, cross country, and comes back out on Essex Street and joins into the interceptor pipe over on North Washington Street. So not a lot, but definitely enough that as Mr. Schleicher had said, it would be problematic if we have to sample all locations.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Paul.
Frank, I highly recommend retirement when you can do it.
I'm right behind you.
Well, not right behind him. I mean, he's been retired for a few years, so.
You never know. I could have been one foot out the door, Bonnie.
You heard it here first. Any other sewer questions for Frank?
Madam Chair,
Is that John?
it is.
All right.
Frank has a long, illustrious career ahead of him, let me assure you.
Is that your assistant superintendent, Frank?
Yes, it is.
Speaking.
He's my anchor.
Sounds like he doesn't want you to go anywhere, so sign right here.
Mike, are you able to share these documents with them so they can look them over further? I'm sure we have more meetings coming up. That way they can see the changes or anything that gets implemented later on, if they really want homework.
They have all your original stuff.
Okay.
We'll send over the new water numbers that you gave today if they don't have that.
I appreciate
Well,
it.
actually, yeah, what's on the screen is slightly different from what we got in our packet. So that's why I was asking Mike to scroll down just to make sure
Sure.
that what I had, what changed, I was noting on here. So
Yeah, these numbers still have some more work to be done. Hopefully we hear nothing more about sewer and that number will stay where it is. The water, I'm a little bit more concerned about.
right. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Frank.
No problem. I do my best to explain it. I hope I get all the questions answered. If you have any questions you didn't want to ask tonight, give me a call. We can go over it on the phone and maybe make simplification of some of these things that just are very difficult to get across.
We appreciate it. Thanks.
Anytime.
Next is the library budget. And
Lee is here.
Lee is here, and I know in the budget that Lee submitted, it increases the hours of the library to 50 hours. And Lee can talk a little bit about the budget.
Hi, Lee.
Can you see me? Hi.
Yep. See you, hear you, all of it.
Okay, awesome. Nice to see everyone.
Good to see you too.
Okay. So we have, I think right in front of you, you have the overall budget. Do you have that?
Not yet. Well, we have it. Some of us may have
Okay.
it
All right, yeah. So I sent you
front of us.
as much information as I had in advance, and then today I also got the supplemental budget from Bob Berg, so you have that as well. For those of you who are new to the finance committee, we're a town department, and it's a town building, and yet we're also a 501c3, and we have a supplemental budget. So the town side, we have our salaries, the overall salaries. We are putting in for a 50-hour budget, which will make us fully compliant with the Mass Board of Library Commissioners requirements. Right now, we're at 45 hours, so it's a 10% increase, I think, in hours, and the wages did go up because of that. So we have 14 staff, 7 of which are part-time, non-benefited. They don't pay into Bristol County retirement. They don't get any kind of benefits at all. They work 9 or 10 hours a week. And then 7 of us have benefits and pay into Bristol County retirement. 4 of them do take insurance, and 3 of us have never taken health insurance, and we don't get any opt-out because we've never taken it. So just so you know about that. We do have sales, which is our network. We pay the membership for that from the town side. And materials, that's the biggest increase. We are supposed to spend 15% of our budget for materials, which is everything from online content to movies or books or anything you borrow. So that's a huge increase. In the past, before 2008, up until 2008, the town paid the entire 15%. And then in June of 2008, we lost about a third of our budget and we're decertified. So we've been climbing back very slowly. And I'm hoping we can get back to where we should be. And I did send you also a comparison to other libraries that are in the network, the budgets and the number of hours that they're open. And as you can see, most of I highlighted the ones that were our population, and most of their budgets are hundreds of thousands of dollars more than ours. And if we had not been cut, our budget would be substantially higher than what it is now. So it looks like a steep increase, but really it's not compared to other libraries. So, and then the supplemental budget, we pay for our own fuel, electricity, janitorial supplies, trash, Almost everything. The town pays for capital improvement things, like the roof, they pay for a lot of that, and the HVAC. And we pay for things like the carpeting, the LED lights, paper, ink, everything that you don't see on the town side, which is a lot. A lot of it is donations. The Friends do a lot of fundraisers. People make donations, and we also have the trust, which we have limits on what we can draw down from the trust for our supplemental budget. And Bob did that budget. It's an estimate. And this year it's going up from 124 to 137,450. But again, he didn't increase fuel a whole lot. Grounds, a lot of things, we don't really know what it will be. So that's the comparison of those different budgets. Did everyone get the packet? Did everyone have a chance to look at it?
We did get it, yes. We got this supplemental
Okay,
right here today,
okay.
but we have all of it, yes.
Does anybody understand about the cuts and the decertifications? Does anybody have any questions about that?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Cody, go ahead.
Hi, Lee. I was
Hi, Cody.
just wondering what's the significance of the certification? What makes it different? Why is it important?
Well, that's the only way that if we're certified, then people can borrow from other libraries. So when we were decertified in 2009, it actually happened. People could not borrow anything from any other library. They couldn't do interlibrary loan. They couldn't go to another library and borrow stuff from there. It was very frustrating for all the patrons. We lost a lot of people who just said it's not worth it, and they started not coming to the library. We used to have 100,000 people come in the doors, and I realize a lot of people are doing things online, but we did lose people that didn't come back also. So one is that. Another thing is we lose state aid, and right now this year it's over $40,000 in state aid. Next year, if we're open 50 hours a week, it'll increase by another 12.5% the following year. And the state is really committed to increasing that because they realize every library is struggling, every town is struggling. So that's substantial. You can apply for grants. There's quite a lot of things you get from state aid. I mean, from being certified. So.
And the certification, it sounds like there's an offset, if not 100%, pretty close to it for that incremental cost of where we are now.
Yeah, the good thing about state aid, it is some funds that we get that is not tied to anything, so you can use it for whatever you need it for. So if, for instance, the Northeastern Savings Bank isn't sponsoring our roof, which they're going to sponsor the roof for the gazebo, we could have taken the money from state aid, but luckily a bank came through for that. But you know, things happen every day. This weekend I was at the library because we had a broken seal in a window, and we had ceiling tiles coming down, and so there's always something, and we have to deal with that. So facility is a big part of the job.
How old is that building?
31 years. Looks pretty good though. We keep it in good shape. We replaced all the lights with LED to save money. And we do a really good job maintaining it.
My kids were there, the reading to dogs recently. They enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's fun. Moet just had 2 puppies.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
So Lee, how you doing? It's Paul
Hi,
Schleicher.
Paul. How you doing?
Not too bad. So how many people do you need when the library is open to adequately staff it?
Well, the minimum,
time.
according to our rules, the minimum is 3, but that's really not enough because you might have somebody doing a program, you might have somebody dealing with, you know, one-on-one with the patron, and then there's one person to answer the phones and do everything else, and never mind all the other stuff that we do behind the scenes. I mean, you know, our jobs are crazy, you know, so that's the absolute minimum. So like Saturdays is all under substitute pay for all the part-timers at the desk. So that's why we have a lot higher substitute line item. The staff, we're salary. We don't get overtime, we just salary. So we alternate Saturdays. But obviously it's preferable to have a larger staff in the building. Because we do a lot of programs and we do have a lot of activity. People are using the study rooms, they're using the technology, they come into programs and they just need help, so.
And then the materials, that's a state mandate?
Yes, that's
For
a
the
state
15%.
mandate, yep. And it's the total budget. So it's substantial, you know. But we are allowed now to use a certain percentage for technology for public use. So if we have to get like we got the AWE station, which is a kid's computer that they can play games on, we were able to use some of that money towards materials. So that was good.
And then the supplemental budget, just so I'm clear on it, that is actually funded through the
That's funded through the trust.
Yep.
We have an endowment that we draw down on the interest. There's a formula. And it's also from donations, you know, the friends, they pay for the museum passes, they pay for furniture. They pay for a lot of stuff that we request, not everything, but when we can get requests. The grounds, we just pay that because we have to pay for the park too. It's the library grounds and also the park grounds. The wells and the irrigation system and the power out there, everything.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks. And I think you got the charts that we made to show the growth that we've already had this year. So even though we lost some, when COVID hit, we kept on going. Our numbers did go down, but we had a lot going on. But you can already see that we're getting back to pre-COVID, which is good.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Bill.
Hey, Lee, how you doing?
Hi, Bill.
A quick question. How much money, I can't imagine it's a lot, but how much money do we lose by doing away with late fees and all that kind of good stuff?
That's a good question. I did include that in the strategic plan because that was a big thing for us to go fine-free. We went during COVID. We went fine-free because we were trying to give people everything that they could from home or like contactless pickup and things at no charge because people were struggling. But they've discovered, and we've discovered that it's really not that much. Our auditors had to approve us going fine-free and also waiving old fines. And really it was determined to the people who needed it most, who were never going to be able to come back and use the library. They had these fines that were outstanding and their cards were blocked. And kids couldn't get cards because their parents' cards were blocked. So it is, maybe thousands of dollars, but it's not hundreds of thousands. I think we still get payment if they lose a book. They still have to pay for the book. They don't keep it out forever, even though they can keep it out longer than they used to. We still get a few $100s a month in printing and the Book Nook and overdue books, not overdue, lost books, things like that. But I would say, Bob Berg, are you still on the line?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Do you know what we lose in fines exactly? Because I know you do.
Well, last year we took in $2,434 in fines, but in prior years it could have run as much as $9,000 or $10,000 on an annual basis for fines. Perhaps a little bit higher than that. I can't quite remember.
So really, I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you think about who you were, the disenfranchised that weren't able to use the library, So we feel like it, and it is the nationwide trend to not have fines. And if we did continue to have fines, they would just go to another library that's not charging fines.
Yep, I don't disagree. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Lee or Bob?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Kevin.
So is it fair to say that the budget includes some of the things to get us back to this, clear these hurdles for additional state aid, but does the budget also include the offsets for those, or is there a year lag before those
Um,
kick in, or how do I,
Well,
is it in here
the
somewhere?
the state aid, it does take a year. You have to be open, prove that you're open from Labor Day to Memorial Day, the extra 5 hours. And then the next year you would be eligible for the 12.5% increase in state aid. That's why it took us so long to get back our certification. We lost out in June of 2008. We were voted decertified in February of 2009, and then it took us a couple of years to increase our hours and then be certified again. It's time consuming. So, and it doesn't totally offset it, but it gives us additional funds to help run the library and be able to offer more. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'll get, is there a rationale for why it was decertified back in 2008 or 9? Like we decertified?
Yeah, we were cut, our budget was cut 33% at town meeting. And we did apply to the state to get a waiver, and they refused because it was a disproportionate cut. If it had been across the board, if other departments had had those cuts, they would have given us a waiver, but it was not the case. There were, I think it was Parks and Rec and the Council on Aging and the library that got hit disproportionately. And it was a really substantial cut, so they said, no, they denied it. So.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any or hearing any.
Well, I hope to see people at the library sometime.
Well, it just so happens we're meeting there tomorrow night.
Are you really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's right, you are coming back for that, the joint meeting.
the joint meeting's tomorrow
Yeah.
night there, yeah.
Yeah, because I know you're meeting at Town Hall and the Media Center too now.
This group?
Select Board is meeting there. People are meeting other places, not just the library. Yeah.
Yes, this group has been meeting for the last few weeks remotely, but other
Yeah.
groups, yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, thank you, Lee.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Yeah,
I
Lee.
know it was a long one.
There's
And
always a few.
We have the treasurer on. We can go back to the debt schedule.
Night.
Night. Hi, Paula.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thank you for waiting all the way till the end.
No, sorry, I wasn't here earlier. That's
No problem.
We did your budget, Paula, and we're on the debt schedule.
all right. Well, what did you do for textile, if you don't mind me asking, because it's missing on one of these sheets.
It's missing on the sheet we had,
Yeah.
so that'll have to be added on.
All right, it's on the lower sheet.
Yeah, I see it.
We go back.
Oh, but there's no department request.
No, the bottom page that.
So you tell me, let's see. This is what we had for the budget, and then under tax title,
Okay.
we had nothing here.
Is that the end of what you have for that budget? Keep going. One more. All right, one more. There, down the bottom of that page there. The 33,471.25.
Okay, yep.
So just a slight increase. I'm a little concerned about that number, but maybe I can figure out ways to keep it down, to get people to pay their taxes sooner. I have to do some work on collections. But
And Paula, when you're talking about tax title, did you want to talk about a little bit about what you've been doing, identifying properties and looking at an auction?
right, I went through a bunch of them, and actually Denise over in assessing helped an awful lot as well, going through a lot of properties. There's a lot of small lots, unbuildable lots, but some of them are next to each other. So we're trying to identify those and preparing for an auction in the spring. I'm certainly not going to do all the properties. There's over 200 properties, but I did get a short list. There's about 35 or so left on the list now, and that's being reviewed by some department heads to see what is possible and to what extent they are buildable lots, or if they're better reserved for conservation, or maybe for sale to somebody like land preservation, or for other town use, if it like abuts like property already owned by the water department or something like that. So I'm hoping to put together a list and have an auction in the spring, which could help free cash. So I can get you more details on that later when the numbers are firm, but I really don't know what the properties are going to be at this point. I just have a starting list.
Okay. Do we want to move on to the debt schedule?
Sure.
And
Okay,
just
so
let me know when you want me to scroll down.
okay, yep. So we have a little over $3 million coming due, and very little bit of it is short term. Most of it is our long term debt, and then as the same strip of interest, most of it is long term. And for short term, we only have 2 small notes out now. They're due in October, and you know, between now and then or throughout the year, there may very well be additional short-term borrowing needs as we expend some of the money that has already been approved for the various projects, the community center, the town hall, train project, and whatever else might come along. So the plan would be at some point to combine, you know, future short-term and our existing short-term into long-term debt. Maybe as early as the spring, but we'll see, depending on how cash flow works for some of those projects and what expenses need to be addressed before the end of the fiscal year. All right, you can scroll down. So this is the detail of all that. I don't know if you have any specific questions on any of those. And this is all combined. You can see some of the school projects in there is, and the library. You can keep going, Mike. Then the WPAT is the Water Pollution Abatement Trust. Those are just segregated out compared to some of the other projects. You can scroll down, Mike. I mean, unless anyone has any questions on it, this is all stuff that's been approved at town meeting, and we're just executing the loans as we expend the money. And coming up now into focus is the short-term debt. So you can see there's not a whole lot there. And then below this is the water source stuff. Their debt. Water's next. So I'm also looking into some software to help with presentation of this and to help better manage it. And hopefully that will be happening by the end of the calendar year.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Zach.
I have a few questions on this. Do you have a breakout of this, all this debt, what is covered under a debt exclusion and what is not?
It is
I
listed
know you
there.
have noted on the sides, but I don't know if there's it's reconciled somewhere on this.
It's listed in parentheses there, the debt excluded. But I don't have it categorized. Is that what you mean, to separate it out into
Yeah, I
sections?
just curious if it's 5 million debt exclusion and 5 million out of the operating budget.
Yeah, I'd have to go through and total those up. I don't have it categorized that way yet, but that's something that debt management software will be able to do easily.
And what is the effects on the rising interest rates on all this debt here? Is it locked into the long term? The long term stuff, I assume, is not affected?
Correct. The long term is not affected. The short term, if we're going to roll that over, we're going to get a new rate in October, so we would be subject to market rates at that point.
And do we have any idea on how much additional the 3 projects that were approved under debt exclusion will cost the residents due to interest rates?
I don't have those numbers now.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Paul.
So Paul, the $1 million bump this year from the last couple of years, is that because some projects just came online, like the fields and stuff, where we gotta stop paying already?
Yeah, it's just yeah.
So, the fields and, the building projects are all, debt excluded. They're on here. The 1 million you're talking about would be the train debt that came due.
A whole separate conversation for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
Hi, Paula.
Hey.
Hi. Do we have a running total of all the debt? I know Zach's asking categorize from debt exclusion versus annual budget. Is there a way that we could show, the total amount of issue versus the total still outstanding? I'm just thinking visually, how I track my own personal budget. I'm looking at, how much longer I have to pay off on it. And I don't know if it makes sense on any of these older ones, if the current interest rates were, if it's even worthwhile looking at.
What do you mean looking at? As far as kind of refunding it, or like a refinance? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
There are rules associated with that, and generally speaking, our financial advisors help us with that and let us know what's available for refunding and what isn't, or sometimes advanced refunding, and they would keep us that do. All that has really been taken care of, and where interest rates are rising, there's not so many opportunities for that.
Right.
But the ability to see how things kind of trail off, how the debt it was going to change over time. The maturity is there, but it's kind of hard to visualize what that is. I agree.
Right.
I haven't had a chance to try and build anything like that, and I think this new software, if we're able to get it, will have that kind of capability, or if not, we'll be able to put it into a format that may make it easier for me to throw it into a graph for you. And just for our own purposes too, either, within the finance team as well as within your committee as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I think you're thinking the same way I am. I'm like seeing where that's gonna mature and where it's gonna drop off, and potentially our annual payments are gonna drop, and where everything's gonna kick in. So like the net fluctuation year by year of what we're looking at for the next, say, 5-10 years.
Exactly.
You do have that now, Paula, right? We have the schedule that goes out and shows what has to be paid every year for the next 20 or 30 years.
Right. As far as long-term planning, but it's not really visualized into a way that makes it really nice to talk. We can get there. If we get this software, we should be able to do that for next year. But yes.
Was that software within the budget request?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? I know we already went through the budget, but now that Paula is here, does anybody have any questions about the treasurer collector budget? $147. Putting it back on the screen. Thanks, Mike.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Joe, go ahead.
I think the one that I was looking for was a bit of a breakdown of what falls under banking services, and kind of wondering why the increase was significant. Percentage-wise, money-wise, it's not that.
Right. That is continuing disclosure. It's new bonds and new bands, things like that. I'm anticipating activity in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Cody.
Just a question. I've got limited knowledge of the surety market, but has anyone looked into converting the bond requirements into, or like if we've got any other type of financial service covenants and trends, what's the word I'm looking for? Converting those into some sort of bond or surety. I don't know if that's captured anywhere in here.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean.
Are we carrying any like debt service, letter of credit fees, or anything like that associated with the financial covenants within those the long-term debt? Like, do we have a letter of credit posted or something like that?
All our debt is municipal bonds.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you, Mike.
Any other questions? I'm not hearing anything. Going once. Going twice. I think that's it, Paula. Thank you.
Are we all set with insurance and stuff? Or is that you all dead?
Yep, we did that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Got everything right, Mike?
Yep, I just wanted to go over this. So obviously, what we've received from everybody is their wish lists. And with those wish lists, we're shot $4.5 million. So I'll email this to you after the meeting. Just going over things on the big picture before I start looking at budgets and items that can be reduced. And I just went through and I looked at if the town had a 2% increase, 2.5, 3%, what that would equal out in total. And then the same for the schools, 2.5, 3%. Now, our net for this year that we'd have available for additional money for appropriations, 2.3 million. And the fixed and shared increase is 1.5. Southeastern Regional's up 135. So right there with those two, you're at 1.6, which leaves us 613,000 for appropriation. So I just went through the revenue and expenditure sheets and did 2%, 2.5%, and 3%, just to show you the situation. And with 2%, would be shot 1.5. So I'll email these to you. It's just obviously it's a broad picture now. We have to get down and look at every budget line item by line item and see where I can reduce it. But I just want to, I'll send that to you so you have a little idea on the situation.
Okay.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Zach, go ahead.
current balance in our stabilization fund, Mike?
The current balance is 2.8 in the stabilization.
And how low could you get that before it affects your credit rating?
Well, our stabilization should be 5% of what our budget is. So anything we take out of there could affect our credit rating right now.
All right. Some somber news now, isn't it?
You got any good news, anybody? No?
I know.
It's always a challenge.
We have a meeting tomorrow night. I know that's, I mean, you didn't have enough fun tonight, so you're invited back. Our meeting tomorrow night is at 7:30. It is at the library, as I mentioned, in the community room. That way it can also be, I believe, broadcast, and we can have people tuned in remotely. I believe a link was sent out, but it was meant for one person. It wasn't meant for all of us. So we are all going to be there in person with the school committee and the select board. I do have some minutes that were sent to me by Anne, and they were just sent to me this morning, so I didn't send them to you all expecting you to review them before tonight, but I will send them out. I'm going to review them myself. I haven't had a chance to look at them and just make sure they look good. And then if they do, we'll send them out to some of them. I think I got six sets. So I will send out probably 3 for review, and then 3 for the following, or maybe 4, because I think she's working on the last meeting, and then of course may finish this meeting as well. So we'll catch up on some of those in the next few weeks. So look out for those. For some of you who don't check your town email too often, it just means checking a couple of days before so that you have time to review them so we can approve them. Anything else?
Just a couple things if I could. On Mondays, the library won't be available if we get to the point where we can't do Zoom anymore, so we would have to use the cable studio. And I did talk with Representative Barrows today, and he's meeting with leadership tomorrow. And I said, any idea what they're going to do as far as remote meetings? And he said he thought they'd do it. And he said he hoped they'd do it in the budget. I said, well, that's not going to work because it ends in April. So he said he'd check with leadership tomorrow and give me a better idea on where they are with that legislation.
All righty.
All right.
Anything else from anyone else? Hearing nothing. It's 5 minutes past 9. If there's nothing else to come before the board, then the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You're gonna come in? We're staying out here.
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote after a motion and a second. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve? Oh, Steve had to drop off. Trace?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Cody?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Just so everyone, I said this when the two folks who joined us late weren't here. When you join, if you join late, if you could just put your time of arrival in the chat, then I won't have, no one else needs to see that you arrived. You'll just be able to tell me. So just for future meetings. Okay, great to see everybody. See you tomorrow night.
Take care, everyone.
Great rest of this night.
Bye.
Night.